know me. And I'm in the Hagerstown office of Remax Results, but I'm licensed in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia. So I also own a real estate school up in PA, so I get calls to go in and do, like, a lot of times in PA, I'm doing Maryland forms in different brokers' offices. But, and really, what I'm gonna try to do this morning is just give you anything new, updated, or revised, rather. And then I thought we'd probably spend the most time discussion on the agreement of sale. Because it seems like that's the area that most people have questions. It's 14 pages of it ain't Maryland. Is it kind of, if you know what I mean? So, the first revised one should be the broker's fee agreement. And we won't have to spend a whole lot of time on this unless you guys want to. But this form has, I don't know how long it's been.
I'm gonna get you to stand back.
Oh, I'm
a little
sorry.
more,
I
just
wanna
to make
film
sure
it.
you're on the camera.
Sorry.
Okay.
I don't know how long this form has been around. I've used it for, the idea of use it for sale by owners. Has anybody ever used this form? It basically makes sure you get paid if you have a buyer interested in a for sale by owner, and they're willing to sit down with you and or pay you a fee to sell their house. This document would create the, the form you need to make sure that you have some sort of an agreement with the seller, not agency, obviously, but, a fee agreement. So, it's pretty basic, I think. I don't know if you guys want to go through it, but, just identify your company, who you are, the seller, and I thought it was funny in the guidelines, it said, when you insert the name of the sellers, make sure they're in all caps. I'm not sure why. But they do want to make sure that on page 1, when you're identifying the seller, be sure you don't take any shortcuts like all registered owners or owners in title or any of those kind of shortcuts that you see sometimes in the mobile list. Make sure you know who the owners are and have all, the legal owners and have their names.
Is this for sale by owner?
This is for sale by owner.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys, I don't want to, you know how to fill out a form. It's basically fill in the blanks. Just, want to make sure you do it correctly and that the seller, it says several times in this document who you represent, which is the buyer. And that should be clearly written there on line 3. Okay?
Like, why would somebody rather go this direction than, because Pennsylvania is a dual agency state, so why would somebody rather go this direction and not have representation? Have you seen that before?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I think it's to save money, at least in the case, the one that I sold.
I feel like they'll say they're 2.5%, they're 3.5%.
They wanted to, right,
Just
so
like-
they paid me a co-broke fee, what would be a typical co-broke fee for that one. And that's the other point, you have to have a discussion with them that the fee is negotiable, but at the same time, your broker has a minimum standard, which is legal. You can state that, hey, my broker says I can't take less than X, okay? But you do have to have discussion about it being negotiable.
Do we have that, Sandy?
What?
A minimum?
Only if you're listing.
Only
Oh, if you're
listing
putting
side.
it out on the MLS, yes, there's a minimum of 2.5.
For a listing side.
Right.
But in this situation, you have a FSBO, and you're just representing the
Buyer.
buyer. The seller will pay a commission to the buyer's agent, not his own agent.
Right.
There's no minimum that we have for that.
Right, it can be, get whatever you can negotiate.
Okay.
Right.
You know, that's where you use your skills, and it depends on how much work you gotta do too, you
Yeah.
know?
And look at what's in your buyer-broker agreement, because if you have an agreement with the buyer that they're gonna pay X amount, you wanna negotiate with
Right.
them to get that amount,
Right,
Right.
not they owe you the difference.
right.
And then, and, you know, you also have to, Pennsylvania, it's mandatory that the seller does a disclosure, a property disclosure statement. Okay, so then you need to make them aware they need to do that. Plus, if the house was built prior to, 78 or prior to, the lead paint, you have to have those documented.
Whether they're doing FISBO or not.
Doesn't matter. It's still, you know, the seller, you have to make the seller aware that they have to make known any latent defects, just like you would any other seller. So in a lot of ways, even though you're not representing them, you still have to do some of the mandatory stuff that needs to be done. It also deals with there on page 2, talks about the deposit money, and who holds it, what happens to it. And then your buyer agency agreement would deal with what happens if your buyer defaults. Okay. But this is basically aimed at the for sale by owner. Okay. Any other questions about that? And I had, if somebody's really interested, I do have the guidelines from the PAR on how to fill out that form or anything you could imagine you'd want to know about it. But I didn't print off copies for everybody, just thinking, I don't know how often you would use it. I've used it once in the last, I don't know how many years, so. Okay. I think these days, our industry has made it, done a good job with making sure that the consumers realize they probably want to be represented. So you don't often run into that unless it's just some fiercely independent person who just, you know. And some people are savvy enough that they, you know, represent themselves. You know, if you've ever done business with an attorney, had an attorney as your client, they don't really, they think it's kind of laughable that we're going to represent them. You know, it's like, hey, I got this. I know what I'm doing.
And yet,
Right.
they really don't if
And they
they're
really,
real estate
not always,
law, they
yeah.
don't.
But, yeah, not to slam attorneys, but, okay. We're gonna move on if you have any questions about that one. Here's a new form. It should be the next one in your pack is broker's request for affirmation. And this is one that says, I'm like, this one basically says to the co-op agent, I don't trust you. No, I don't know if you can say it that way. But the example that PAR used for this is, let's say you submitted an offer, you're representing the buyer, you submit an offer, and you find out there's multiple offers. So if you're going to resubmit, you know, if you're going to change the offer, you resubmit it, you might want to send this along just to, and all it does is affirm from the listing agent that they did present your offer. Okay? I'm sure this came out of some point of contention, you know, some grievance is why they created this. I don't know of anything like this in Maryland. But,
No, but I
it's,
think they should have one.
but it's brand spanking new. Well, if you guys that were here during the boom, you know, 2005, 6, you remember, I don't know how many people still practice it, but a lot of agents would, well, almost all agents wanted to be there to present their offer, especially when you had multiples. I think some people still do that. I ask for that, but not nearly as often. So I think this kind of is supposed to replace it. You still doesn't, you know, necessarily present your buyer in the best light without you being there, but, okay. Questions about that?
So this doesn't look like though that the seller actually signs it, it looks like just the broker does.
Right. You're just asking them,
Did you actually,
Did you present my offer?
And I would rather the seller just sign it myself, but,
Right,
or to get something back from the seller.
right.
I like for you guys to get something back from the seller that says rejected or something and they've signed it,
Right.
so.
Yeah, and that may be part of it too. You could ask for that as well. And some of these, I don't know how much time we're gonna spend on these next two. The next one in line is pre-settlement possession addendum. Anybody ever use these in any states?
In Maryland.
Maryland? Yeah.
That's not too many times.
So it's it's basically, yeah, I
It's not
know.
my favorite thing.
Any pre or post possession can get really hairy, you know, we know. But hopefully, this establishes some sort of non-lease agreement that, you know, the seller doesn't lose their rights, but the buyer has, you know, possessory interest. I thought it was interesting, one of the things in here that they state is that the seller has access with 24-hour notice once a week. But I'm not sure why anybody would want to, I guess it depends on how long the buyer's going to be there. But it covers a lot of stuff that would probably be in a lease normally, but it's definitely not a lease. So if the buyer would default, then they're, you know, what this says is they will immediately vacate. Okay, now how do you force that? You know, at least that's enforceable, I guess, through whatever steps you need to take legally. Okay? Again, this is just an updated form. All this stuff I'm giving you was just new as of this year. Okay? One of the things I didn't print out, but I don't know if you're aware of it or not, and I realized it on the way down here, in the Pennsylvania form, we can cover it when we get to it. But now, if you're the buyer's agent and you have an agreement accepted, you need to make sure that the title work is ordered within 7 days. Is everybody aware of that? Yeah, they changed that in PA last year, late last year. And I think it's, well, I know it's to prevent last minute problems, title problems, that they don't, you know, they want you to discover it early on, so it can be dealt with. Okay?
Most
That's
title
in here.
companies-
What's that?
Companies up in PA definitely do not operate the same way that title companies here in Maryland operate.
No,
Unless I just got a couple of bad bunches, but seems that there's definitely a lack of being on top of things.
right,
You know, waiting for, you know, a week prior to settlement to even reach out to the sellers. It's
Right.
like, you know, it's insane to me.
right. Yeah, and the other sort of loosey-goosey thing that happens in PA is the deposit. And it's kind of a fill in the blanks. I don't know if you noticed on page 2, I'm on the standard agreement of sale now. Page 2,
So in our packet, we have residential property management agreement next. So
yeah,
skip it
yeah,
over.
we do. No, I'll go to that. I don't want to get in. All right, let me just, does anybody do property management? No? Does anybody care about it? You have the updated form in your package.
It's OPP, other people's problems.
Yeah, yeah. But I just brought it because it was an updated form. And the standard agreement of sale was updated too. But what I wanted to talk to Kaz about
Yeah.
is the deposit. Oh, there it is. Page 2, underneath 2, 1. Initial deposit within blank days, 5 if not specified. But it's a very common practice in PA that, you know, you'll have to reach out to the buyer's agent and say, hey, where's that deposit? And, you know, you get everything from, oh, hey, well, the buyer's gonna drop that off next Tuesday when they, you know, whatever. It's just real, I don't know, we used to drive, Kay, our office manager in Hagerstown used to drive her nuts. It's like, where's the deposit? I can't process this file.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of a PA thing.
One thing that came up with the last transaction in Pennsylvania was the title company was asking for I looked at Lisa and I literally said, do you have a depository or something like that? And I said, listen, I'm not gonna tell you what I think that actually is.
Right.
I don't think we have it. They were asking for somebody that was in charge of, depositing or overseeing earnest money deposits, somebody that was specifically in charge of that. They used this title for it. And Rachel did eventually find a form that she has that, says, yes, we have received the earnest money deposit.
Oh.
But at least it said it is becoming more popular if the listing agent is holding the EMD, that the title
Oh.
company is asking to have the
Right.
depository of the office, like depository clerk.
You want
or
to see
something.
like a receipt.
Yeah, basically, some kind of a form or, whatever.
Yeah.
So,
We're finding that more and more, and I know with short sales, they used to always request it. The bank always wanted to see that that deposit money was,
Yeah.
and just so you guys know, I mean, our office policy is 72 hours. So
Right.
you should put if you're representing a buyer, you should put 3 days in there.
Right. Yeah. I try to make it,
You're ready to-
I try to collect it
Right, that's it.
immediately, or at least a copy of it if I have to do it electronically, and then gather it up just as soon as
Right.
possible. Yeah. All right. So we can just start with page 1 and work our way down through. Stop me or jump in if you have any questions about anything. I don't know what everybody's different experiences there are. I also have, and this might be more useful to you than some of that other stuff, but Pennsylvania does have a standard agreement, guidelines for preparation and use of the standard agreement. I only made one copy, but I'm happy to pass it out if somebody wants it. It'd be a good reference. But you wouldn't necessarily have access to this unless you're a member of PAR, which you wouldn't have to be just to be PA licensed. So you can't really get hold of this document.
So Penmar does not have it.
Penmar does not have it, not that I'm aware of, no. You mean like in zip lines or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. Yeah, or, you're welcome to reach out to me if there's anything I
Didn't
can.
we used to keep a copy of that in file in the Hagerstown office?
There's one for the consumer.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
That one is on zip form.
That one's on zip form.
Okay.
This is for the licensee.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should probably, I'll take some copies of
Yeah.
that.
I'll
Yeah,
copy it.
it'd be a good reference. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll make copies.
Keep them in a form and a file.
Right. All right, so top of page 1 deals with parties. And I don't want to be like redundant here or just, you guys all know how, you got to have the parties, not just some, you got to make sure you have legal names and addresses and everything in there properly. Under property, please make sure, you get as specific as you can. You can't always find what you need in the multi list, so you might have to do some digging. Especially like deed book page numbers or whatever. I don't know what everybody's common practice is, but I like to fill in all the blanks, every single one.
There usually is a tax identification number on it.
Tax ID number, I
What you
think,
get-
works.
What you get on that though is very limited unless you pay for the
Right.
the system. I know at least in Franklin, or,
Yeah. The Franklin County Tax Assessor's Office just refuses to kind of get on board with, providing information, or they wanted, I don't know how much money to do that. But anyway. Buyer's relationship, I think it's pretty easy to see. The only thing that had been kind of missing in the last year or so, you know, the company license number, you kind of had to either dig it up yourself or ask. I see more and more agents are starting to put in the documents with their listings, the brokers, or the brokerage's license number for the state and the agent's license number. And I'm not sure why we have to do that, but I don't know how that came about. Sandy, do you?
Well,
The
I
license
know-
number?
I mean, they definitely were doing it because they wanted to make sure people from other states were writing offers from, and other states that people weren't licensed.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the law, at least, I think the law came out a couple years ago that they wanted to see the broker license number on those.
Okay.
Just to make
Right.
sure. In Pennsylvania, it's a little bit different because I have a license number and then there's also a company license number.
Right.
So they're asking for the company license number, whereas
Yes.
in Maryland, they want my
Yes.
broker number. So it's
Yeah.
a little different.
It is a little different. So that's an RM number rather than an RB number?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. All right. The other thing in that buyer's relationship with the licensed broker, everything else is pretty easy, but you want to make sure you understand what your broker's policy is on agency in Pennsylvania. You know, that agency is a little different in PA than it is in Maryland when it comes to dual agency. Also designated agency. Everybody know what that means? The difference?
Break that down into like.
A designated agent would be, I represent that client, not everybody in the company represents them, right? Versus, so typically, unless you specifically, you know, have that written in here or designated somewhere, you would assume that everybody in the company represents, you know, because it's the company's, you know, the brokerage always has the relationship with the client, right?
Right.
So I don't know what our policy is. I think we do designated
Well,
agents,
yeah,
right?
but I mean,
Typically.
it always says that I can designate an agent
Right.
to represent someone.
Right.
And that's even in the state of Maryland, but I kind of give you guys,
Right,
if you're working with a client, you sign by our agency agreement, I'm designating you to work with the client.
Right.
I'm not gonna
Same
run
thing
around
with
and
this.
well, you know,
this
Yeah.
thing, right?
the pitfalls to avoid is, if I'm designated agent for that client, and I'm showing a company listing, or want to show my own listing, you know, then I'll know how to deal with agency, right? And also the, you know, the other thing is, not just everybody, when it comes to the commission, some brokers will pay a commission to a buyer's agent, but not a sub-agent. So I guess you're paying attention to that too, so you know what you're doing, right? Any questions on that? Anybody? Okay. And I can skip ahead if this is all just kind of elementary to you guys. I know it's just a little different in Maryland, and if you're practicing Maryland all the time, just,
Yeah, I think it's good to go over it just
Okay.
to refresh
Yeah,
your.
the agency is really like, really wackadoo and, yeah, it seems like, you know, the whole dual agency versus designated agency versus like, I don't know, it just seems odd.
mhm.
I'm just assuming that we're always, unless we're either a dual agent or we're a designated agent.
So a designated agent says, hey, I have a listing agreement or have a buyer agency agreement. The dual agent is, hey, now you understand, I had a listing agreement with you, because that's where it's different in Pennsylvania, but now I can actually act as a dual agent. It's not the broker, but you as the
Right.
licensee can be the dual agent.
Right.
So if you had a buyer, if you had a listing, and you had a buyer who showed up and wanted to write, you could actually be a dual agent,
Right.
you yourself,
Does
for
that
those
change your agency, or does that just, so you remain you remain the broker representing the listing, but I am a dual agent?
Well, ultimately, because you're under my brokerage, you are the dual agent not representing both parties, but working with both parties to bring the sale together
Right.
as a dual agent. In Maryland, it's different, and the only person that can be the dual agent is the broker.
Is the broker.
Right.
Right.
So, But ultimately, I'm responsible for you at the end of the day.
Right.
I'm
There's
responsible for both
There's an
those
explanation
parties.
right at the bottom of
So-
page 1.
Yeah.
And basically it says, all brokers, licensees are also dual agents unless there is a separate designated agents for buyer and seller. So, you know, you just have to be clear on
Yeah.
who's doing what, who's representing who.
Right, and that's where it gets a little confusing.
And it says the same, the sentence right after that, if the same licensee is designated for buyer and seller, they're a dual agent.
Right.
Instead of the designated agent, but, so I can think the wording of it is
Well,
just funny, like you're being.
They're that client's agent unless they represent both, and then they
Right.
automatically are dual.
And then you have to disclose that. at
And then
that
you have
time.
to disclose
Just
that.
say that, hey, I am a dual agent.
Yeah. I don't know, what's everybody do? You know.
I mean, I've been doing, you know, because I've been doing listings, now this, for the first time, it's actually coming up that I'm doing this transaction I was telling you about,
Right.
that's on both sides of the fence, so that's why I'm curious about it. I've been doing designated agency
Right.
in my, you know, in my listings and all that, because it's only ever been that.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
But when that buyer comes in now, you really do become the dual agent unless they have an agent. So that's the
Right.
difference in Pennsylvania. So if they don't have an agent, you're kind of, gotta go back to the seller and to that buyer and say, well, I'm actually a dual agent now, you need to understand.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah, Mike?
going off what they're talking about, expanding on it one step further, like I have a listing in Pennsylvania right now. What if I happen to have a buyer who I've already signed a buyer agency agreement with
Right,
for PA,
yeah,
happen to be going along for a couple months and all of a sudden they want to see my listing. But
right,
I've signed on with that listing agreement with the seller way beforehand.
right.
Is there a specific addendum, like what we would have for understanding whom, or something like that? I'm trying to think back in the forms. What would you do then? Because now you're actually converting yourself to
Right.
dual agency if they wanted to move forward.
Right. Yeah, then you had, and I'm trying to think of what, I don't know that
Because I
there
can't
is
think
in
of the
PA
form,
a
yeah.
specific form,
You know,
like Maryland, that deals with dual agency.
Yeah, I mean, in PA, they have that, you know, that
Consumer notice.
verbiage, the consumer notice
Yeah.
that you're supposed to tell
Right.
people,
Sure.
you know, and so I guess, you know, you would be using the consumer notice again. I would just go back to that and say, you understand.
Maybe
Yeah, we are.
both parties sign the form.
And
that-
because it's actually in your contract, it says what you are at that
Right.
point. So you're kind of covering it here without having to have a separate form,
That's true. That makes
Right.
sense.
so.
Yes,
How does that happen in practice, though? Like, how, being mostly working in Maryland, Sandy, how do you represent both parties? I mean, if they're mutually, their goals are mutually,
You know, you have to be fair and honest to all parties, and the other party needs to understand that, you know, it's more, I don't particularly like it, and I know why, I
Right.
know why Maryland, you know, came up with the way that they do it, because it really does make it separate. But you just have to be fair and honest to all parties. Still, if a seller has told you something in confidence while you had just the listing agreement, you can't share that with, you know, with a buyer. But after that, you gotta let them know, hey, I'm a dual agent now, so please, you know, don't be sharing something with me that maybe I shouldn't or wouldn't want to share to the buyer. So, I think at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if other states start to go with Maryland way, because it does put you in a precarious situation. Virginia's the same way. You can be, as the agent, you can be,
West Virginia. too.
yeah, really, Maryland's the only one that finally came out and said,
Mhm.
we want to make it clear as to who you're
Right.
representing.
Right.
Darren, did you need a packet? Did you need a
Yeah,
packet?
there's one.
Is there any extra packets?
No, I guess we're out.
What's that?
We'll have to make more copies.
Yeah, I can go make some
Um,
copies. Grab. Somebody can make a copy. Anybody else need a packet? Everybody else get a packet?
Okay,
I think
thank you.
the consumer notice says, I think, if I'm not mistaken,
I never know.
the consumer notice, I think, describes that you are representing both the buyer and the seller, but you can't do so in a way that would put either party at a
Right.
disadvantage.
It does explain
Yeah.
dual agency, yeah. So it talks about transactional agent, buyer's agent,
Right.
seller's agent,
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just have to decide. What I've always done, and for years, has been, if I represent the seller, like in Mike's case, and I had a buyer that I have an agency agreement with, I've always told them, I can't represent you on this property. And I've never had anybody that had a problem with that. You know, so I just make sure I do, you know, whatever the consumer notice and or the agency agreement, you know, make sure it's clear. I have something documenting that for this property, I'm not representing them. Because I don't really want to be a dual agent, you know, so everybody feels a little different about it, you know. I have other colleagues that they always do dual agency on there if they sell their own listing. I had called I wasn't sure, one of my brokers at one time with another company I was with, I was talking to them about dual agency in Maryland, and he said I couldn't sell my own listing in Maryland, is what he said, and I said, I don't know about that. So of course I called the hotline. I don't know if you guys ever use that, but that's a great resource if anybody needs the numbers for PA or Maryland. So I called and got, I forget who it was, but the first thing they said was, well, did you ask them if they had representation? That should be your first question. And then from there on, basically what she said was, yeah, you can, you know, as we all know, because Maryland kind of cleared it up a little better. This has been a few years ago, but you can sell your own listing. It just has to be done the right way. Okay. All right, page 2. A lot of this stuff is just fill in the blanks. I don't know that there's any question about it. Darren and I don't know if there's a couple of people that weren't here, we were talking about deposits. You know, it depends on your broker's policy, how soon they want to see those deposits delivered. And, you know, depends on the timing. If you're going to close in less than 30 days, usually they're going to want a certified or cashier's check. Or, you know, it may be a case of wired funds, but I've never had that happen with a deposit. You just want to make sure that the money's there if you need to go for it in case of a default. You damn well make sure that the money's there. Because guess who's going to be responsible if it isn't? Right?
Not me, you guys. We have the policy in place.
Right, yeah.
Make sure you follow it.
Right. Yeah, you know, and again, the practice in different states is different. You know, everybody has a sort of their own standard, and it's whatever that everybody agrees on. So, all right, seller assist. That's kind of different than Maryland. Of course, it's right here in the agreement of sale, rather than a separate addendum. I think that's normally part of the bank. No. It's like if it's FHA, VA, or conventional financing, isn't the seller subsidy part of that document in Maryland?
No, it's a separate.
That's separate document,
Yeah.
yeah. One PA,
Seller
anyhow.
contribution.
It's still not separate, it's in PAs. It's right there. Okay. Settlement date is, in Pennsylvania's time is of the essence state. So, you know, any dates that are in there, if you go past them, it could make the contract voidable. It doesn't make it necessarily void, right? You know the difference.
Pennsylvania